that you're joining us for The Unfair Advantage. This is our small group video curriculum, and we've been going through the life of Joseph, learning about how to take every obstacle and turn it into an opportunity, every unfair thing, and using it for the advantage that God has for your life. And we're looking at the life of Joseph. Joseph's story in the Old Testament is so beautiful because it's so connected with all of our stories. It's not just something that happened, it's something that continues to happen. There's a dream that's put in your heart, and that dream is from God. It's something great God wants to do through your life. But that dream coming to pass is through a road that's paved with a lot of pain and a lot of difficulties and a lot of struggle. And that's what happens with Joseph. He's rejected by his family. He's sold off into slavery. He's purchased by Potiphar. He's not paid. He's now wrongfully accused as Potiphar's wife came on to him. In the last session, we learned how he's thrown into prison and there for 10 years. 10 years. Now we learned that there was a purpose in the prison. Joseph was being trained, whether he asked for it or not. God was preparing him in private for what was going to happen in public. But then he gets a glimmer of hope and he meets these people, the cupbearer and the baker. And I think it's so interesting that God builds his kingdom relationally. He always puts people in your life that'll help move you to the next level. Nobody is self-made. Nobody did this on their own. We are all but a product of the grace of God and the relationships he puts in our life. So he puts this cupbearer and the baker that are Pharaoh's officials in Joseph's life. And while he's there, Joseph interprets their dream. And their dreams are that one of them is going to be killed and one of them is going to go right back up to Pharaoh. We pick up on the story. It says, now as the third day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a great feast of his officials, and he lifted up his head of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of the officials, and he restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that once again he put the cup into Pharaoh's hands, and he impaled the chief baker. This is exactly what Joseph said was going to happen, just as Joseph had said in his interpretation. And the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. That was Joseph's one request. Hey, whenever you get back there, can you just remember me? Tell Pharaoh who I am. And he's forgotten. He's forgotten. The next verse says, 2 full years had passed. 2 full years had passed. What do we do when we're forgotten? When people let us down, when nobody notices us, what we understand, and I talk about it a lot in the chapter that you're going through, is that when we feel forgotten, God is forging us. He's working things out in our life. And I want to encourage you in this season that while it looks wasted right now, it's actually very, very necessary that you are in a season where you're not seen, you're not recognized, you're not celebrated. You see, I think a great example of this is a diamond. Diamonds are beautiful. You know, they're a woman's best friend, they say, right? Every lady wants a diamond. And what we realize with a diamond is this most beautiful thing actually was created. Scientists say it takes hundreds of millions and billions of years for a diamond to be created. What is it? It's through the pressure underneath the earth that is constantly forming and shaping these things. And we find it and we think, oh, this is beautiful, but we don't see the years and years and years and years of being hidden. And that's the same with your life. You see, you're in a season right now where you feel hidden. You feel like nobody notices you. You feel like, man, I'm not being recognized. No, it's during those seasons that God is working. You might feel hidden by man, but you're not hidden by God. I say it in the book, and I want to encourage you. You're planted right now. You're not buried. So much of our life, we think we're buried. It's over. There's no way this is going to turn out. But it's during those seasons that we're behind the scenes that God is actually working things in us and through us. I always believe that God will never do something through you that he first didn't do in you. And I'm thankful for the seasons in my life that I was behind the scenes, not recognized. Nobody knew who I was. And it was in those seasons that God worked beautiful things in my life. There's no overnight success when it comes to legacy. It's going to take longer than you want it to take, but it's going to be greater than you could imagine. So what do we do during these seasons? What do? We recognize that God is working behind the scenes. It's taking a long time, because what he's building is amazing. Remember, weeds grow overnight, but oak trees take decades. And you're not a weed. You're not an overnight success. Because if you're an overnight success, you could die out overnight. But an oak tree takes decades of I'm going to be planted. I'm going to get my nutrients. I'm going to do the right thing, even if nobody notices it. And I'm going to be strong throughout my life. So why do things take longer than we want them to take? Well, I have found it's usually for a couple different reasons. Two possible reasons. First of all, there could be disobedience in our life. Disobedience keeps us from going into the promised land that God has for us. When you think of the children of Israel that left Egypt after this story, they ended up going from Egypt into the promised land. It should have taken about somewhere between 20 and 40 days for them to travel, especially with the amount of people that were there. But what kept them in the wilderness for 40 years? Disobedience. Disobedience keeps us from the purpose that God has for us. So maybe there's something in your life right now that you're not being obedient about. What I've found with God is God will never give you what's next until you're obedient with what he gave you last. So you want the next word from God. Are you obedient with the previous word he gave you? You want the new revelation. Are you obedient with the current revelation that God's already given you? So it could be disobedience that's making this season last longer. The other one is development. And God uses our seasons where we're behind the scenes to develop us. I remember when I was growing up, the way that we would develop pictures is so you take your little Kodak camera, y'all remember this, and you go take your little photos, and then when you would use all the film up, you weren't able to like put it in your computer. That's not what was available back then. You'd have to take it to your local drugstore, and they would bring it behind the scenes into this thing called a dark room. And a dark room is where they would open up the camera and they would get the film out and they would develop the pictures. Beautiful pictures were developed in the dark room. And I want to say it this way over your life. Beautiful pictures are still developed during the dark rooms of life. In these dark seasons, God's developing you. He's working things out of you. He's getting you to crucify your flesh, evaluate your motives, and be transformed into the image of Christ so that you can really walk into the purpose that God has for you. So why is God preparing me? Preparation is necessary for the promised land that he has in mind. He's working right now because he knows what's there. He knows what's next. And if he gave it to you early, you wouldn't be ready for it. I've seen in so many blessings in my life through the church, through the ministry God has for me, through the book that I was able to write. And all of this did not happen when I got saved at 16 years old. It went through seasons, really probably over a decade, where I felt like, man, there's so much in me, but nobody else notices it. That's good for you. It's actually good for you to have those moments, for you to go, it's okay that I'm not being recognized because God's doing the work in me. Here's my challenge for you. Stop asking God to deliver you from the very things he is using to develop you. He's using that season where you're waiting. There's a purpose to it. You're trying to really make excuses during this time. No, I'm going to make attempts at what does God have for my life. I'm going to recognize that he is developing me in this season. Here's my challenge for you is while you're waiting, don't quit. Don't quit. I know it's hard. And this is the time in the book study that I want y'all to really challenge each other. Don't quit. Don't stop early to the greatness that God has for your life. I give some stories in the book about where I quit and cashed out early. I think of my brother who bought Bitcoin. I remember he bought it years and years ago, and he bought it for so cheap. I want to say it was like maybe $100, and he bought a thing of Bitcoin. And I remember him telling me about this, and I said, what is this thing? It doesn't even make sense. And then he doubled his money and then tripled his money, and then he sold out of it. And it was like a big deal. And then I remember Bitcoin, if you don't remember it, it went up to like tens of thousands of dollars every single coin. So once in a while, I'll send him a screenshot of what Bitcoin is today, just to kind of rub it in a little bit of what he missed out on. What did he do? He cashed in early. It's the same with a lot of our lives. We quit early, and history is made by those who didn't quit when it got tough. So sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. Keep going. Keep pressing after God. The Bible says that those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. And I'm telling you, what does that mean? There's strength when you wait on God and you say, God, I don't understand why I'm hidden right now, but I'm going to wait on you and I'm going to embrace you during this season. So here's my challenge for you. What are you waiting for in this season of your life? What are you leaning into? Like, what's the relationships that God's got you connected with in this waiting season? What are some relationships you can grow in this waiting season? That's what we learned with our story with the cupbearer and the baker. God had a purpose in the waiting season. And what is the ultimate why that'll motivate you when you're tempted to quit? Remember, the story's not over. If it's not good, that means it's not good yet. What I've realized is when it's not good, God's not done. So I'm going to keep working it out. I'm going to keep pressing into Him, and I'm not going to quit early and cash out early for the purpose God has. If He's got you waiting, there's a purpose in it. And what I've learned with God is while I'm waiting, God's working, and He's setting up the scene to bring about the purpose that He has for my life.